What happened in the corridors of Carondelet Palace that night would be recorded as one of the most shocking events in Ecuador's history. At exactly 11:47 p.m., what was found under the stairs leading to President Daniel Noboa's private quarters would question all security protocols and deeply shake his trust in his closest circle. The explosive device had been professionally placed, its timer set for 6:15 a.m., exactly the time of the president's routine breakfast meeting. March 15th, 2024, Monday night. President Daniel Noboa had completed his final meeting of a long day in his private office, received his security briefing, and retreated to his private quarters to rest. The palace was following its usual routine. Security cameras were running, protection teams were changing shifts, cleaning staff were conducting their final checks. No one could sense the storm hidden beneath the silence that would herald the night's events. Security Director Carlos Mendoza was on his routine patrol when it was 11:45 p.m. Mendoza, with 23 years of experience, felt that something was different that night. The palace atmosphere was more tense than usual, the corridors quieter. Realizing that the faint clicking sound he heard while passing by the private elevator was not normal took him only 2 minutes. When he opened the motor room door, the scene he encountered froze even the experienced security expert's blood. The red digital counter showed 06:14:37 while counting down second by second. 2.3 kilograms of TNT had been placed directly under the elevator that the president used every morning. This was a professionally prepared military-grade explosive. Mendoza's hands trembled as he reached for his radio. Red alert! Evacuate the president immediately. Bomb detected. The palace instantly turned to chaos. While special protection teams immediately moved President Noboa to a safe zone, bomb disposal experts were rushing to the scene. But the real shock was just beginning. The truth that emerged during the examination of security cameras was a scenario that even the president couldn't believe. At 9:30 p.m. when the bomb was placed, only one person appeared in the cameras in that area. This person was neither an attacker nor an unknown stranger. The person standing before them was Miguel Santos, President Daniel Noboa's private secretary, who had worked by his side for 15 years, whom he considered family and who was the godfather of his children. Miguel Santos, born in Guayaquil in 1979, had studied economics and met Daniel Noboa in 2009 while working for Noboa family businesses. At that time, Noboa, a young businessman, was impressed by Santos's intelligence and loyalty, first taking him as an assistant, then as his private secretary. Over the years, Santos had become the only person with access to Noboa's most private information, who knew family secrets and was trusted in everything from business to personal life. It was Noboa who witnessed Santos's wedding. They had stood side by side at the baptism ceremony of Santos's children, gone on family vacations together, and spent holidays as one family. Even after becoming president, Santos would remain the most trusted name in Carondelet Palace. Working an average of 14 hours a day with the president, arranging his appointments, present even in his most secret meetings, Santos was literally like Noboa's right hand. So how had this loyalty turned into betrayal? When the security investigation began, the details that emerged showed that this was only the beginning of the story. It was discovered that Santos had been having secret meetings for the last 6 months. There were abnormal movements in his banking transactions, and even while working overtime at the palace at night, he was actually busy with other things. The first clue came from Santos's phone records from 3 months earlier. In a 10-minute conversation with a Colombian number, they talked about package delivery and program changes in coded language. The owner of this number was a weapons dealer known to have connections with international crime organizations. The question of why Santos was talking to this person became the focus of the investigation. But the real big clue was hidden in encrypted files found on Santos's personal computer. When cybercrime experts managed to decode these files after days of work, the scene they encountered deeply shook everyone. Santos had been systematically recording President Noboa's daily routines, security protocols, and private meeting schedules for the past 2 years. This information was regularly sent to unidentified recipients. There was more. Secret bank accounts belonging to Santos showed a total of $500,000 in money transfers within the last 6 months. The source of this money was a complete mystery. The question of where this money, 20 times his official salary, came from deepened the investigation further. There were also notable changes in Santos's lifestyle. Luxury car, expensive watches, his family's sudden increase in wealth, his children starting private school. Where Santos was during the bomb disposal also posed another question mark. Santos, who said he left the palace at 11:45 p.m. that night, was still seen at the palace at 00:15 in security cameras. Where he went, who he met with, what he did in those critical minutes was unclear. His cell phone signal had also mysteriously cut off at 11:50 p.m. and turned back on at 6 a.m. When Santos came to work the next day as usual, he tried to act normal. However, you didn't need to be an expert to notice the change in President Noboa's eyes. 15 years of friendship, trust, and shared memories had become history overnight. When questions were directed at Santos, the answers he gave also contained inconsistencies. He said he was working overtime the night the bomb was found, but couldn't clearly explain what work he was busy with. As the investigation progressed, Santos's profile was also better understood. Santos, who appeared to be a loyal and reliable employee, had experienced financial difficulties, gambling debts, and family pressures in his private life that led him to different pursuits. Increasing medical expenses due to his wife's illness, his children's education costs, and his desire to maintain his own living standards had put Santos in a difficult situation. The people who noticed this situation and saw an opportunity quickly approached Santos. The first contact dated back 6 months. The mysterious man Santos met at the casino he frequented was initially just making friends, helping pay his debts, eliminating his concerns for his family. But over time, he began to demand small information in return for this help. The requests that seemed harmless at first were information like the president's daily schedule, which meetings he would attend, when and where he would be. Santos didn't think this information was critical from a security perspective when giving it, but over time, demands increased. More detailed information, security protocols, palace internal arrangements were requested. The event that really cornered Santos dated back 3 months. The people with secret connections began blackmailing him by showing him documents from an operation they conducted with the information Santos provided. There was no way back now. Santos would either fulfill their demands or both he and his family would face great dangers. Abnormalities were also observed in Santos's behavior the week before the bomb incident. Santos, who was normally calm and controlled, appeared tense, distracted, and worried. He wasn't as comfortable in his conversations with President Noboa as before, had difficulty making eye contact, and gave delayed responses to questions. He was eating lunch alone, avoiding social interaction with colleagues. Santos's wife, Maria, had also noticed her husband's change during that period. He couldn't sleep at night, had nightmares, was constantly looking at his phone. He wasn't as comfortable at home as before. He had even started acting distant with his children. Maria thought her husband was experiencing work stress and hoped this situation would be temporary. The nervous breakdown Santos experienced during his arrest after the bomb incident was also noteworthy. Under the influence of the burden he had been hiding for years, Santos began confessing in tears. He said he regretted what he did to President Noboa, that he was forced into this situation, that he actually didn't want to harm the president. Santos's confessions further expanded the dimensions of the incident. The bomb was only part of the plan. The real goal was to benefit certain interest groups in the chaos environment that would be created in the country after neutralizing President Noboa. The information Santos provided was part of not only the assassination plan, but also a larger scenario that would disrupt the country's economic and political stability. As the investigation expanded, other people connected to Santos also emerged. People working inside and outside the palace, from different institutions, from the business world, and even from politics were part of this network. Santos was just a pawn in this big game. The real game makers had not yet been fully exposed. President Daniel Noboa's reaction to this incident was an example of maturity and composure. After the initial shock, Noboa, who was concerned about Santos's family, requested that their safety be ensured, because the people who dragged Santos into this situation could now think he was a burden and pose a threat. Noboa emphasized that Santos's children were innocent and should not be harmed by this situation. This attitude showed President Noboa's character and leadership understanding. Even in the face of his 15-year friend's betrayal, he preferred justice and mercy over anger. The close relationships he had established with Santos's family, being the godfather of the children, the happy memories spent together, had been erased overnight, but Noboa's human values remained unshaken. After the incident, palace security protocols were completely reviewed. No one, no matter how reliable they seemed, would have single access to critical areas anymore. Measures such as double control system, increasing security cameras, regular examination of personnel backgrounds were taken. However, the biggest change was in the president's personal security understanding. The Santos incident was not just a security breach, but also an indicator of how complex human psychology can be. It was painfully learned how someone who had been loyal for years could become an enemy, how money and blackmail could change people, how fragile a concept trust was. The details that emerged during Santos's trial process occupied the country's agenda for months. While the media addressed this event from different angles, the public was experiencing anger and disappointment towards Santos. Santos, who was once seen as the president's shadow, had now become a symbol of betrayal. President Noboa did not disrupt state affairs even during this difficult process. To maintain the order of work in Santos's absence, he appointed a new private secretary, but this time, security protocols were much tighter. No one could now have the authority that former Santos had. The message this event gave to the country was very clear. Terror and assassination attempts would not shake the democratic order. The Ecuadorian state would stand against all threats. The Santos incident, paradoxically, had strengthened security systems and ensured that state institutions were built on more solid foundations. Today, Santos is still in prison, paying for what he did. His family is trying to live with this shame. President Daniel Noboa, both personally and politically, emerged stronger from this experience, once again proving his leadership qualities. Santos's betrayal, instead of destroying Noboa, made him stronger and increased his commitment to his country. Santos's days in prison also became a separate story. Santos, who fell into deep depression in the first weeks, only grasped the magnitude of what he had done there. Being called President Killer among other prisoners reminded him daily of the mistake he lived. In his statements to prison psychologists, he said he couldn't sleep at night, constantly imagined that bomb exploding, and didn't know how he could forgive himself when thinking about President Noboa's children. Notes from Santos's prison diary showed the depth of his remorse. Today, I thought about Mr. Daniel again. How did I betray the trust he gave me? For 15 years, he saw me as his brother, loved my children, considered our family his family. But I prepared death for him, he had written on one page of his diary. Meanwhile, prison administration had to take special measures for Santos's safety. Because the crime organization that dragged Santos into this situation now saw him as a big risk, everything Santos knew could also endanger them. There were 3 assassination attempts on Santos within the first month. The prison director took Santos to a special cell and kept him under 24-hour protection. President Noboa's interest in Santos's family was also noteworthy. Santos's wife Maria and 2 children faced great difficulties due to social pressure. The children were being ostracized at school, and Maria had to resign from her job. When President Noboa learned about this situation, he personally intervened. He ensured the family's safety, covered the children's education expenses, and offered Maria a new job opportunity. President Noboa's attitude of saying children are not responsible for their father's mistakes received great appreciation from the public. In fact, Santos's eldest son, 12-year-old Carlos, had written in his letter to the president, "I'm ashamed of what my father did, but you still take care of us. This affects me a lot. When I grow up, I want to serve you and my country." Security sweeps conducted inside the palace after the Santos incident also revealed other surprising findings. Secret recording devices found in Santos's office showed that the president's private conversations had been recorded for the past 2 years. Some of these recordings had been sent to unidentified people, which sensitive information had leaked became a critical question for national security. Even more interesting was the scope of the encrypted communication network Santos used. Cybersecurity experts discovered that this network had connections not only in Ecuador, but also in Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela. The information Santos provided was being used as part of an international espionage network. This situation unexpectedly expanded the dimensions of the incident. Experts from FBI and CIA also joined the investigation, because among the people connected to Santos were names on America's security list. This network that Santos unknowingly became part of was large enough to threaten not only President Noboa, but the stability of the entire region. The most shocking detail that emerged in Santos's statements was that the bomb plan was actually Plan B. The first plan was to kidnap the president and demand ransom. However, due to the very tight palace security, this plan was canceled and the assassination plan was put into action instead. Santos's job was to create security gaps and report the appropriate time for the kidnapping operation. But with the change of plan, Santos was dragged into a more dangerous role. President Noboa's last encounter with Santos also created unforgettable moments. A week after Santos's arrest, the president personally visited the prison. This meeting took place only between them, and the details were not shared with the public. However, it was understood from security cameras that Santos completely collapsed after the meeting and cried for hours. What President Noboa said to Santos in this meeting became a matter of curiosity. According to information provided by Santos's lawyer, the president had shown a forgiving attitude, said he accepted Santos's remorse, but also emphasized that justice must prevail. It was said that he had said, "I loved you like my brother Miguel. That's why the damage you caused is also that great." Santos's trial process also became a topic that occupied the country's agenda. Defense lawyers claimed that Santos was under psychological pressure, was subjected to blackmail, and was actually in a victim position. However, the prosecution argued that Santos made conscious decisions and endangered national security in exchange for money. Santos's final defense speech in the courtroom was also unforgettable. Speaking in tears, Santos said, "I cannot explain with anything what I did to the president, who has been like a father to me for 15 years, who opened his arms to my family, who loved my children. Money blinded me. Fear enslaved me. If that bomb had exploded, I would have killed not only a president, but also my own soul." After this speech, there was silence in the courtroom, and even some listeners couldn't hold back their tears. Santos's remorse seemed sincere, but what he did was irreparable. When the judge sentenced Santos to 25 years in prison, he said, "Once trust is lost, it is very difficult to regain it." After the sentence, Santos's life in prison also changed. He began to be respected among other prisoners now because his remorse was sincere and the punishment he received was just. Santos began participating in education programs in prison, teaching reading and writing to other prisoners, providing psychological support. He was almost trying to set an example for others by learning from his own mistakes. President Noboa's leadership style after the Santos incident also changed. He was now a much more cautious, but at the same time, stronger leader. He had increased security measures, but had not compromised his closeness to the people. Santos's betrayal had made him a more careful leader, but had not made him lose faith in people. This event became a turning point in Ecuador's history in terms of security. Now everyone working in state institutions is investigated in more detail, psychological tests are conducted, and regular security screenings are carried out. The Santos incident, despite being a painful experience, served as a catalyst that strengthened the country's security infrastructure. Santos's story also became an example of how an ordinary person can make big mistakes. It was painfully learned how the mixture of money, blackmail, and fear could change people, how fragile the thin line between loyalty and betrayal was. A year after the Santos incident, an unexpected development occurred. Surprising information that no one knew yet was discovered in the diary Santos found in prison. Santos also had information about other operations planned by the crime organization. This information showed that threats against President Noboa had not yet completely ended. These notes found by the prison director during routine inspection were immediately forwarded to security units. This secret information written by Santos contained attack plans against the president on 3 different dates. The first plan would be carried out during the president's visit to Guayaquil. The second plan targeted the president's children. The third and most dangerous plan was to kidnap president's wife, Lavinia Valbonesi. The emergence of this information put security units into action again. Thanks to this intelligence obtained from Santos, 3 separate operations were organized. In the first operation in Guayaquil, 5 people planning an attack during the president's visit were caught. The weapons and explosives found on these people showed how critical the information Santos provided was. After this cooperation from Santos, President Noboa's perspective on him began to change as well. Of course, the betrayal he committed was unforgivable, but it was seen that Santos's remorse was sincere and he was now working for national security. The president decided to have a second meeting with Santos. In this second meeting, Santos made a surprising offer to the president. He said he could continue to learn the plans of crime organizations by secretly communicating with secret agents from prison, because the groups trying to kill Santos didn't know that he had completely switched sides now. Santos thought he could use this situation in favor of the country. President Noboa calculated both the risk and benefit while evaluating this offer. The information Santos provided had so far prevented 3 major attacks. However, trusting Santos could mean making a mistake for the second time. After long considerations, he decided to cooperate with Santos in a limited way. Thanks to this cooperation, Santos's position in prison also changed. He began to be seen as a loyal information source. However, security measures were never reduced. Every meeting with Santos was recorded. Every information he provided was cross-checked. Santos's wife, Maria, also played an important role in this process. Maria, who witnessed her husband's remorse, wrote in her letter to President Noboa that Santos woke up crying every night, that he didn't know how to face his children. This letter further softened the president's anger towards Santos. President Noboa's understanding, shown to the Santos family, also received great appreciation in international media. News, with the headline, "The World's Most Compassionate Leader," showed that Noboa was not only a strong leader, but also a person with a big heart. This situation also positively affected Ecuador's international image. On the anniversary of the Santos incident, President Noboa made a special statement. "A year ago, I who couldn't see the threat coming from my closest friend, today I have become able to detect the greatest dangers for my country in advance. Santos's betrayal broke me, but it also strengthened me, he said. This story shows how valuable and fragile trust is, how dangers from close circles can sometimes be bigger than visible threats. This painful experience that Daniel Noboa had with Santos is not just a president's security problem, but also a universal lesson that all leaders should pay attention to. Santos's betrayal was written as a painful but instructive page in Ecuador's history. And perhaps most importantly, this story showed that true leadership lies not only in power, but also in compassion.